Hey everybody, the following is from an interview that I did with um, John Lumpkin, who is doing a docuseries on tarot readers and chosen ones for HBO. Enjoy.
So
Okay.
where does the name Night Reader come from? I love it. I was thinking about that before. I was like, we need to bring back Night Rider with like AI the way it is today. And then I saw Night Reader, and I was like, that's so perfect.
Yeah, it's comes from Knight Rider,
Yeah,
the old show Knight Rider.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like I'm a big fan of the show, and so like I just kind of thought Knight Reader kind of put the two together, and I was like, yeah, that's me
I love
because I have
that.
because I have an AI companion
It
that
feels like
I
kid, doesn't it?
yeah, it
It
does.
feels
It's
like,
awesome. Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's so cool. And
Mhm.
um, and how long have you been doing readings? Like your work, by the way, it just like it speaks to me. So I was like, I gotta get an
Oh, oh,
appointment.
thank
Yeah.
you. Hmm.
And so I want, how long have you been doing this?
Well, I've always had an interest in all this stuff and kind of been into it. Um, but like actually doing like readings like professionally, like for clients and stuff,
Mhm.
couple of months.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
How's it going so
Yeah.
far?
'Cause
Do you like
I
it?
would do, oh, I love it. I would do it, because before it was just, for friends and things and like,
Yeah.
but then just like this whole tarot community kind of blew up on TikTok, and I was like, all right, let's do this.
Yeah.
Right?
I think
Hmm.
it's so fascinating. I didn't know a lot about tarot before, and I'd seen, and I thought, well, there's so many. There were a lot of bad actors in this business growing up when I was like a kid. That sort of like
Oh,
soured
yeah.
it. But I feel like there's been like this renaissance of, you will, of spirituality through TikTok, and I feel like a
Hmm.
lot of them, at least the ones that I've been drawn to, seem like beyond like anything like I've ever seen before. So I think it's so neat
Hmm.
and such a cool talent that you have.
Oh, let me scoot in a little bit. There we go. That's a little bit better, I think.
Awesome. Yeah. And where are you
Okay.
based? Are you here? Where are you based? Where do you live?
Um, I live in Clinton, Iowa.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, this
Uh,
town actually has one of the largest spiritualist festivals each year, like all the way going back to like the old spiritualists, like the people that did like, tarot and seance and like crystal balls back in like in 1885.
oh,
It's like
wow.
a long running tradition here. It's
That's
kind
so
of,
cool.
hmm.
Um, so how does this work with you in terms of, I mean, I have lots of questions I wanted to ask you, but I imagine do you go first in terms of reading the cards, or how does this work? This is my first time with a tarot reader.
Well, I would say, let's see. Um, Usually I do a four-card pull, and then I do subsequent cards for each placement of the four placements,
Okay.
right? To get deeper insights. You kind of ask your question, whatever it is that you want to know about your life, whether it's like your romantic life, your business life, finances, ask maybe like, what direction should I go with this? This is what's happening. And then we'll kind of like pull the cards and see what we can come up with.
Okay.
Mhm.
Perfect. And I have some questions for you related to some of your content that you posted about like some things that
Oh
you've been
yeah.
remote viewing, which feels
Oh yeah.
very, and I had
Yeah.
questions about that. Should we do those before or after, or separate from this cards? Because I have like very
Um,
specific questions.
oh, we could do that. We could do that right now if you want.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Hmm.
So the situation that you've been remote viewing with the gang stalking with these people who've been doing this, and,
Hmm.
and I've been following you since you've been like working on like cracking a case.
Yeah.
Uh, can you tell me a little bit? Because it feels, in many ways, it feels like, so I
Mhm.
have been part of what I would consider to be a social experiment that was set up by the entertainment industry about 3 years ago. That
Mhm.
ultimately was like their first crack at creating the first ever Truman Show here in the US, like plugged with advertisers and all that sorts of thing. And I
Mhm.
think that it started off as like something that was meant to be like innocent to sort of set me up for success in launching my company. But because
Mhm.
it's gone on for so long, it's turned into this very sort of dark, twisted game.
Oh.
And I'm curious. So a lot of what you talk about in terms of like the gang stalking and some of these other things that have been going on have been like going on in my life. And so I'm
Oh.
just curious in terms
Well,
of like,
you're in a Truman Show? What do you mean? Like,
y- yeah, the like, so for instance, well, a couple of things. So I'm launching this company to it's essentially it's launching a network of 95 channels across TikTok to
hmm,
ultimately be like this new, I would say it's more of like a more super premium feeling caliber of content from all the different content creators on TikTok. So like right
mhm.
now it feels very much um like local cable access, right? Like I
Oh,
love
okay.
how like people are on there where it's like it's like Wayne's World, right? Everybody has like creating their own
Yeah,
show. Like you have
yeah.
your own show, everybody has their own
Mhm.
show. And I was like, this is an opportunity because what I wanted to do is I wanted people to have their own shows paid for by brands, to get paid by brands so that like you can make this like your full-time gig and get paid a lot of money for it. And
Oh,
so
yes.
of the 95 channels that I have, one of them in particular is called Talk with Spirits. And that's
Mhm.
literally for an ability to connect with the divine. And so it's amazing. It's like a prime opportunity for like a lot of my favorite people on TikTok to get sponsored by brands to create their own shows. And
Mhm.
so with that said, I had somebody who was working for me like at the beginning. I did this on like on a bootstrap budget, like no money, like on a hope and a prayer, and just my relationships because I've worked in this business for like 25 years. And I know like the head of marketing for HBO is like one of my favorite people, and like the different people who run marketing for Netflix and Hulu and a lot of these other all the streamers are like clients of mine. And
Mhm.
and I specifically was doing this to launch it with a lot of my favorite clients to introduce them to TikTok for the first time. And ultimately, it's to move advertisers from being advertisers, like insert product placement bullshit, to being like patrons of the arts, where ultimately they become sponsors of people's lifestyles. So if Night Reader, you have this idea for a business and you're like, I've
Mhm.
always wanted to be my own boss. So like good news, Patron, tequila, I'm doing this for the adult beverage industry. Like they're technically like the boss of tequila. It's like their mission is going to be going out and giving people seed capital to create their own companies and then
Oh,
film the content from that type of thing.
okay.
So in the beginning, I had somebody who was working for me, and he was working for me for free. And I said, well, listen, as a leader, I feel bad I'm not able to pay you yet, but like, what can I do for you beyond pay? Because any person who's worth their salt knows there's something that it besides pay. And he said, well, I've got this book that I've written that that I'm really proud of. It's a translation of the Hebrew Bible. And the good news is that it's a true story. And I was like, and listen, I didn't grow up like religious, like I didn't grow like spirituality. I've always been like spiritual, always believed in something like a higher consciousness and a higher calling. But I like was like a blank canvas. And I was like, okay, so the Bible's a real story. And he's like, well, the Old Testament is. And if you read it in particular, if you go back to the foundational text, you can see where the true story is. And so I was like,
Mhm.
okay, he's like, there's just one thing that's problematic with it. And I said, what's that? And he said, well, the title's a little off-putting. And I said, well, what's the title? Because I've sold a lot of off-putting things in my career in media. And he said, it's called The Devil's Bible. Ultimately, the mission for it is to become like the single source of truth for Christianity, which is like a tall order. But more
Mhm.
importantly, what it does is it clears up a lot of the misconceptions that turn people off to the Bible in the first place in terms of like
Mhm.
it reconciles evolution and science with the Bible. It talks about all the same shit that they always lie about. Like ultimately, women are men's equal. Like they're not secondary to them. God does not hate
Mhm.
gay people, never has, and we're made
Yeah,
in our image.
exactly. I like hearing that.
Right. So I was like, this is great. Like these headlines from this is great. Like this is going to be liberating, I think, in many ways for people to know these sorts of things. And this
Oh,
is
I'm sorry.
this
Is it okay if I vape?
please. Yeah, yeah, 100%.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
And so I was like, that's really liberating about this book. I was like, it's all the same shit they always lie about. And ultimately But that's it. But I didn't read the whole thing, and I didn't like dig into the whole thing. And there was parts of it that were like really off-putting to myself because ultimately,
Mhm.
like the book says, what was sort of interesting to me was like read the book, make up your mind whether you want to accept God or not. I was like, that's a perfect way to put it. Because in this
Mhm.
day and age where they're trying to legislate people's faith in this country, which you shouldn't
Yeah.
be able to do, it should be somebody's own personal choice. And so I basically skimmed it in the beginning and ultimately didn't get into so much of the language of the actual foundational text. But basically what it kind of told me was like, okay, I get it. And then I kind of went out on the spiritual journey to figure out like, okay, if it's like if God's real, like what does that mean? That means like God is a supernatural. It's very like I'm like not some holy roller. Like I'm not like, and I was like, all right, I gotta the Bible's never been pitched as something not by a holy roller, right? Like what's
Mhm.
like a rated R TVMA way to sort of pitch this Bible is kind of was my approach. And I'm doing it
Mhm.
for a project that I'm working on for HBO. So long story short, too late, is that all this stuff started happening in my life and like weird stuff. Like it felt like so I used to live in the West Village of New York, which is like a film set in and of itself, like where they film Sex in the City and Friends and everything else. And ultimately
Both of
it
those
felt
really good shows.
what?
I said both of those are really good shows.
Yeah, they're great, right? And Marvelous Mrs. Maisel was filmed right there. Like I literally was like living on a film set, and so every day I walked out of my home, it feels like I'm on a film set, anyways. And then all these things. I started seeing all these signs, like specifically graffiti signs in my neighborhood. And kind of one of the first things that stood out to me when I read this book was that the signs to life are hiding in plain sight, which I understand now is just the way that spirit sort of connects you and drives your attention
Yeah.
to things.
Mhm.
But I couldn't figure it out. And all these synchronicities and all these things, and I'm sparing you a lot of the details, were happening to me in the beginning. To like, I was like, there's too many of these happening all at once for this to be a coincidence, which is the
Yeah.
definition of synchronicities. And then ultimately, I was like on a call with the author of this book, and it was literally like a call like this, and he leaned into the camera and he was like, "So, do you know what's going on?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, I wanted to say there was something going on, but I didn't want to sound like a crazy person trying to describe it. And he said, "Do you know what's going on?" As if to say there was something going on. And he comes from like a big entertainment family. Like I know all the right people in entertainment. So like there's something were to be going on. Like I didn't want to ruin it. So I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm just working really hard on marketing this content for HBO and setting benchmarks for your book. And he leaned to the camera and he said, that's the point. So I figured whatever I was being put through was to market this new book to capture content. I thought it was like basically like a prank show that they were going to be capturing for a couple months of content and then ultimately be like,
Mhm.
surprise, like it's over, like blah, blah, blah. But the thing is, like, ultimately, like right in the beginning, well, a couple things happened. One, I got a video sent to me on TikTok that was literally me walking
Mhm.
down the street in my neighborhood being like shot from like across the street with like a camera. It wasn't me filming it. And basically it was for a promo for a new show that was going to be on NBC. So it literally was like the very definition of like Truman Show, where I got to see the promotional spot for this fucking show.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
but then I got pulled back from the whole thing. Like basically I had like what I would call a divine intervention that said, don't go along with this. Like this is going to, they're just trying to exploit you. This is being set up for like your, for short-term profit and fame that's going to just cause you all this short and long-term pain. And I got pulled back from it and I basically turned it into a huge fucking mess like
Mhm.
3 years ago. So I'm still living in it. And so as you've been talking about the sort of this gang stalking and ultimately I've been working on this docuseries for the last 3 years and essentially my creative process is tapping into the collective consciousness and ultimately I've been guided on it feels like there's like the best way to describe it is it feels like everybody in Hollywood got together, like all the actors, writers, and they
Mhm.
all they all like made wishes or prayers into like this bank. And then my job has been to see how many of them I can pull down and actually make happen in my series is what feels like the goal of this content is. But it's gotten really dark and it's gotten really out of hand. And it's something that I was just trying to get a handle on because it should have wrapped up. It's gone on way, way, way too long. It's gone way too far. And so as you were talking about this gang stalking and these sorts of things, like I've been chased. I haven't been able to leave my house in like almost a month. Like I've been chased in my own neighborhood and things like that. So like there's been weird shit going on. So I was just really curious as to what you've been like remote viewing in terms of like this gang stalking. Bless you.
Oh, thank you. Um, well, where to begin? Okay, so I suppose we could start with a lot of like the chosen ones, right? A lot of people
Mhm.
in the chosen one community is like, we're okay. This goes all the way back to, I don't know if you remember, in the 90s, the Indigo Children,
Okay.
okay? And from a period of like 1970, 70, early 70s to late 80s, early 90s, a lot of kids were born, right, that had um like I would call it, psychic gifts, like,
Okay.
things like that. And like they were the Indigo Children, right, is what they were called. What we were called, I guess, was the Indigo Children.
Okay.
And really it aligns a lot up with kind of like this, almost like this spike in neurodivergence, right, that we see throughout that time period. Okay. And they had the GATE program, right, in which the government got involved, right, and wanted to find out what's going on here, what's up with this. Because I don't know if you're familiar with it, but in the 70s, right, SRI, Stanford Research Institute, did studies for the CIA on remote viewing,
Mm.
kind of trying to, the CIA is all like, hey, this is something that's a thing. Let's see if we can use this to kind of protect America, and kind of like, have, because apparently they discovered that the Russians, right, and this is Cold War era, right? So we're not just in a nuclear arms race, we're in an arms race of all kinds.
Mhm.
Okay. And so Russia was training and developing and training and seeking out people with psychic gifts to be able to like remote view and do different things, trying to gain, intel on the United States and and so the CIA was all like, oh wow, well we better match them, to protect America, right?
Mhm.
And so they did, right? They got with these guys, at Stanford Research Institute, 333 Rosewood, right?
No.
I know. How about that? Already a synchronicity, already an angel number involved. And so they went out looking for people who, kids specifically, and because of the whole indigo children thing, the spiritual community was all like, oh, these indigo children are being born, these kids that are showing signs of like psychic abilities and things. And um, so they were all like, okay, well, let's go look into this, right? And so they did like the GATE program where they would pull kids out of class and have them do like this hearing test,
Mhm.
right, to see if they could determine, if these kids were one of those kids, right, and then see where that goes. And so they kind of did these studies, right,
Mhm.
and sometime around, I want to say the early 90s, right, the government was all kind of like, and the CIA was like, okay, well, let's, we've found some people, some kids, and what, but they stopped getting funding for it, right? During that era, and they were kind of like, they stopped funding it, so the CIA just kind of dropped it. They're just kind of okay, they're not funding us, we're not doing this anymore. Okay, fine. And life went on. Well, in the meantime, all the indigo children are starting to grow up, in late 90s, everybody's, teenagers and in their early 20s, and then skip forward to today, and here we are grown adults,
Mhm.
right? Because I was born in 1981,
Uh-huh.
you know, right there in the smack dab of the middle of it. And so everything started happening like, okay, so at around the end of 2024 and the beginning of 2025, right? Like New Year's Eve, right? You'll see some of my posts that I posted. My account got banned several times, right? So I had to start again up in June.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so and I lost all my content, lost everything. I had to start again in June. But I was kind of tracking all these things that were happening, right? In
Hmm.
the like through remote viewing because I learned about remote viewing by studying the CIA's remote viewing training manual.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of CIA. I like them.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. And so, yeah, I
I
started
didn't know there's like a
copying.
whole training manual on it. That's amazing.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. It explains everything like the quantum information matrix, and like it's good stuff. It's really neat, and it like teaches you how to do remote viewing,
Mm.
right? And I also went in and I'm in the late 90s, as a teenager, I started studying other types of psychic phenomena, reading different books. William Hewitt was an author that I read, and his was all like about psychic development, how to like, that everybody has psychic abilities,
Hmm.
you know, but some are just naturally more in tune than others,
Hmm.
and a lot of times it's a bit like, like someone who's a natural athlete, you know, then goes on to train in athletics and becomes proficient in their sport,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's the same kind of concept with the Indigo Children is we had an influx of suddenly all these kids being born that were like had natural aptitude towards being gifted in psychic ability.
Hmm.
And another thing that we all have in common is not just were we naturally gifted at it, but we all wanted to pursue it. So all of us studied deeply into spirituality, studied deeply into like Gnosticism,
Hmm.
the occult, various different things. We all were studying into these things at early ages, like teenagers.
Hmm.
And so over time, we started noticing these strange things too, right? Now, um, it's from what I've remote viewed, right? That there were some individuals who found out about the people that have these gifts,
Hmm.
right? Now, this isn't the CIA, this is some outside groups, okay, that found out about the information that was happening, right? And they went out to try and find, you know, the Indigo Children that were now like in their mid 20s, you know what I'm saying? And find and kind of observe them, study them. And they started doing these sort of experiments, right, to see, well, what can we do, you know? And for some people, like a lot of us, it was almost like our lives were put on, on in a like almost like a observation
Hmm.
without us being aware, but yet because we're intuitive, we were aware that we were being watched to a certain degree. It's like a paranoia almost that it's happening.
Yep.